So I've been getting asked a lot to do a video about all of my equipment and my sump area on my 220-gallon reef tank. So in this video, that is exactly what we shall do, my friends. All of my equipment and my sump area on my reef tank. Now this tank has been set up for about 2 years with a tank move to a different house in between that time. So really, like realistically, I don't even know what to call it, but let's just say that it's been running for about 2 years. Now the tank itself, the tank is a WATERBOX Reef 220.6 reef tank. Dimensions of the tank are 72 by 25 by 23.6. And I always say that it's 220-gallon tank, but y'all, that's just wrong. The whole system is actually 215 gallons, but I just, for the sake of simplicity, I've always just kind of referred to it as my 220 gallon. But yeah, the whole system is actually 215 gallons, which is kind of weird that they would call it a 220. I don't know why, but hey, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's really my problem. But yeah, I really love this tank. I think it's very beautiful and really well made, but sometimes I just wish I went a little bit smaller. This tank is difficult in terms of maintenance, to say the least. I mean, the volume of water and everything, it's kind of hard for me because the tank is quite literally taller than me. So it's just, it's rough maintenance wise sometimes, but you know, it's a fun challenge. I think bigger reef tanks like require so much different care than small tanks do, I guess. It's a lot to get used to, especially with the fact that the corals have to be so big to be able to actually see them. So this is like a big one for me, but whatever. This is my tank. WATERBOX 220.6 reef tank. Moving on to my lights, I have 4 ECOTECH RADION Gen 5 XR30 blues. Jeez, that's a mouthful. But I am definitely a RADION girly. Like, I love RADIONs. I think they're 100% worth it because they are quite expensive. I mean, they are definitely the most expensive equipment that I have on this whole system, but I think expensive sometimes is definitely worth it, especially when it comes to lighting, because lighting to me is like one of the most important things that, you know, to growing coral successfully. So with these lights, you really have no limitations in what corals you can keep. You know that your corals, you know, given the right care and yada yada, are gonna be nice and bright and look good under these lights. Like you just know that you're settled in the light department when you have RADIONs. You don't want to be in the kind of situation where you're going through like 3, 4, 5 like sets of lights before you realize you should have actually coughed up the money for the RADIONs to begin with. You know, like I never want to be in that position. So I'm just a RADION girly, like true and true. Definitely love these lights. The light shades, I get asked a lot about where I got these light shades. These are not actually aquarium lights. These are just standard light shades that I got from IKEA and retrofitted my RADIONs to fit inside of them. I still have to do a lot of cable management. I mean, obviously staring at these wires is like the ugliest thing ever, and I know you guys hate it, and it's something that I've been meaning to do, but man, I looked up the cables, the extension cables that is. I looked up the cost of the extension cables to just hide these cords, you know, in the ceiling or whatever. Freaking $300? Like, I know that's not a lot, but it's like, it's an extension cord. You know what I'm saying? $300 on an extension cord. I just almost would like to figure out what the extension cable normally sells as and buy like the non-reef version of that, because an extension cable is an extension cable at the end of the day. Am I right? Like, it shouldn't cost $300. Okay, rant over, but man, it's something I need to fix, and I'm fully aware that I need to fix it. Y'all don't need to comment any of that. Moving on to my flow, I have 4 MP40s on this bad boy, and honestly, I just think they're great power heads. I don't really have much to say about them. They have some strong flow power. I have 2 on each side of my tank in order to have a better spread and control over the direction of flow, versus if I were to just have 2 MP60s on each side. Having 4 is way better because you can actually control, like, hey, like this side of the tank is going to get less and this side is going to get more, like point it more specifically towards a group of corals. I think this is quite essential, particularly if you're trying to go for a mixed reef tank, you gotta control the flow. That's like the most important thing that you need to think about when you're making a mixed reef. So yeah, that's why I went with the 4 MP40s rather than 2 MP60s, and I definitely recommend that approach no matter what type of power heads you choose, because it's just way better, especially for a big tank like this. I mean, if you have a small tank, it's a different story. I wouldn't recommend that, but for a big tank like this, in this particular situation, 4 is better than 2, in my personal opinion. Now, my stand, before I get into my stand, oh my gosh, the stand is so messy, and my sump is so messy, and I don't want to hear it. Like, seriously, this is like why I kind of put off making this video, because my cable management is deplorable. I mean, I have some, I don't know, cable management. I'm definitely limited in that department and need a helping hand to get that under control. So right now, I'm kind of embarrassed, and I want none of y'all to judge me, because y'all know that your tank stands look just as messy. I don't want to hear it. And if your tank is actually like super neat, then you know what? Good for you. But you're gonna see why I say that really quickly. Look at this. This is, I'm cringing editing this video. I'm cringing. Like that's not the best job of my attempt at a controller board. Basically, I have this idea that I really want to put this controller board in this right section of my tank. So if we can look past the messiness for just a minute, I'll go over the equipment that I have in this section. So I have a Neptune Apex controller. I have a Neptune Apex controller, ORP, pH, temp, and salinity probes. And I use the Apex controller to just monitor things, and also to set timers to dose like X amount of milliliters per day to meet my coral's consumption needs. I also do have a Trident, and I have never set it up till this day. Y'all hate me for it, but honestly, I don't trust it. Basically, the Trident tests your water for you and then tells your Apex to dose a particular amount, right? So if somehow something goes wrong, like if either one messes up along the way, like if the Trident messes up or it's not calibrated well or whatever, right? The Apex will always dose with the missed wrong reading, which will lead to either dosing or underdosing your tank. And this scares the ever living out of me. Like, it's just, I can't trust the Trident. So although I have a Trident, it's growing dusty in my garage because I just don't trust it. So for now, I just have the Apex controller. I also have the INKBIRD temperature controller, the Wi-Fi temperature controller, just for extra redundancy. I mean, you know, can't beat extra redundancy. My heaters are hooked up to the INKBIRD, and then the INKBIRD is hooked up to my Apex. So if the INKBIRD fails, right, the Apex will catch up to it. And that way we have no heater issues going on in this tank. You know, extra redundancy is wonderful in terms of heaters, because heaters are always doing some things they're not supposed to, you know. It has this really cool app though on your phone which alerts you if you have a temperature swing, which is pretty neat. I found it's just a little bit of an extra touch that's not really that expensive, just a little bit of redundancy, a little bit of something, you know. Now moving on to my sump. My sump is quite messy as well. Apologies, forgive me, for I hate cleaning my sump. In my sump, I have a NYOS Quantum 220 protein skimmer. You know, I love a good skimmer. This one works really well with my tank. I have no complaints. It's like fudge when it comes out. It's gloriously nasty. You know, love a good skimmer, love a NYOS skimmer. So that's all I really have to say about the skimmer. Also have my Apex probes in here, the ORP, pH, temp, and salinity heaters. I have 2 BRS 300 watt titanium heaters, which, like I said, they're hooked up to the INKBIRD, or INKBIRD is hooked up to the Apex. One thing about where I place them, always place the probe first, then the heater in the sump, because you want your probes to check the water that's coming directly from the tank. Otherwise, it will take a temperature reading of the water right after it's heated, like that small quantity of water after it's just heated. So it's going to give you an incorrect reading. So always make sure probe where the water enters, heaters where the water exits, and that's how I place those guys. So I also have a failed REFUGIUM section here. I've yet to reset it up, but I do have these TUNZE EcoChic LED REFUGIUM lights in here. They're kind of cool because they're waterproof. I think that's pretty neat. REFUGIUM, like I said, isn't really set up anymore, but got some REFUGIUM lights in case I ever change my mind. And then lastly, I have my VECTRA L2 pump here. The pump works really well for me. It's always worked really well for me. me. That's good, you know, but I've heard some horror stories about a few people failing. And, you know, I'm not sure if there's just one or two like freak circumstances and it just so happened that, you know, it spooked me. But now I have a backup pump in my garage anyway, just because I'm psycho and it only really takes once. And I'm sure this isn't, I mean, the pump works really well for me, but it's like you hear one story and then you're just like, whoa, that could have been me, you know, and then you just freak out and start hoarding aquarium equipment in your garage. That's the best way to describe the person I've become since I started this hobby. So it's something I'm working on, but I definitely have a hoarding aquarium products problem. I will be the first person to admit that. But yeah, in my left cabinet is where I used to have my auto top-off reservoir, which now houses my kalkwasser. This is about a 10-gallon, 11-gallon-ish auto top off that came with the tank. Like I said, I recently switched to kalkwasser and popped it inside of here. And I do kalkwasser now instead of dosing, and I absolutely love it. Fast growth. I've had nothing but stability, happy corals. I feel like my tank has really switched around since I started using kalkwasser, and I really love it. I need a calc reactor, like really badly though, because right now I'm really roughing it on the mixing situation here. So for every gallon, I add 2 tablespoons of calc powder, get this acrylic stick out and paddle and mix it together, let it settle. Then I use an Apex doser to add it to the tank. So it's definitely a lot like an ideal scenario here, but it's been working really well for me. And how I actually calibrated it, I started off with, I don't know, something like 300 to 500 milliliters for my tank size when it had little amount of coral in it. And then I would see how that affected my tank for a few days, meaning I checked the pH and the alkalinity. And then if the alkalinity fell in number, the next day I would increase the kalkwasser, and if the alk increased in number, then I would decrease the kalkwasser until it evens out, until I get the level I want, which is somewhere between like 8.3 to 8.6. It's good to also monitor pH as well. If your pH falls, add more kalkwasser. You know, I'm personally always fighting to increase the pH of my tank, so if you're monitoring pH and you base how much kalkwasser you add to your tank off of that, usually the alkalinity parameter will just fall into place. Like once the pH goes to 8.2 in the tank, then I would check my alkalinity. And most tanks start with a 7.9 or 8.0 pH, you know, so adding kalkwasser increases pH and then in turn increases your alkalinity. So I would check what your alkalinity is after you reach 8.1 pH, and then check it again at 8.2 pH, and then again at 8.3 pH. And usually the alkalinity will just fall into place because the pH and alkalinity are like fairly related to each other, so you can calibrate the kalkwasser either way, you know. But so yeah, that is all of the equipment I have running on my 220 gallon build, or 215 gallon, so I should say. It really is my dream tank in terms of equipment. I wanted to make this like a bigger special build to me, so I just really love all of these products. So I linked every product and equipment that I mentioned in the description if you're interested in any of these items, and let me know in the comments what videos you would like to see more of. I'm kind of running out of ideas ever since I started uploading weekly, so any suggestions are much appreciated.